Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got one of them crazy stories sent to me by everybody. Headline: California restaurant used fake priest to get workers to confess sins, according to feds. Amy Peachy wrote this story. A restaurant chain in California enlisted a fake priest to take confession from workers, with the supposed priest urging them to get the sins out by telling him if they'd been late for work or had stolen from their employer, according to the Dept of Labor. The restaurant owner operates 2 restaurants in Sacramento and 1 in Roseville, according to the statement from the Labor Department. Attorneys for the restaurant did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The alleged priest also asked workers if they harbored bad intentions toward their employer or if they'd done anything to harm the company, which of course is all stuff a priest would be asking you, right? The agency called it one of the most shameless scams that labor regulators had ever seen. The Diocese of Sacramento also investigated the issue and said it found no evidence of connection between the alleged priest and the actual church. And that came from the Catholic News Agency. While we don't know who the person in question was, we are completely confident he was not a priest of this diocese. And that's from the Director of Media and Communications for the Diocese of Sacramento, and he was talking to the news agency on that one. Hiring an allegedly fake priest to solicit confessions wasn't the restaurant chain's only wrongdoing, according to government officials. You mean somebody who'd hire a fake priest might do something else weird? A court last month ordered the restaurant owners to pay $140,000 in back wages and damages to 35 employees. I'm curious, though, could he change that amount if he could say, but yeah, this person confessed that they actually clocked in late one day? The restaurant chain's owner allegedly brought in the fake priest after the Labor Department started investigating workplace issues. According to the Labor Department, its investigation found that the company had denied overtime pay to workers, paid managers for money customers had left as tips, and threatened workers with retaliation and adverse immigration consequences for working with the agency, according to the agency. Pro tip: if you are ever the subject of an investigation by the feds, it does not look good if you tell people around you, don't cooperate with them. It just doesn't look good. It might also have other problems, but it does not look good. The Labor Department said investigators learned from some workers that the restaurant owner had brought in the priest, who said he was a friend of the owners and asked questions about whether they had harmed the chain or its owner. In court documents, a server at the restaurant testified that she found her conversation with the alleged priest unlike normal confessions, because she'd apparently been to a normal confession, and then when she encountered this, it didn't seem quite right. She said in a normal confession she might talk about what she wanted to confess, according to court document reviewed by CBS Money Watch. Instead, the priest told her that he would ask questions to get the sins out of me. To get the sins out of me. That doesn't sound like a phrase a priest would use. He asked if I'd ever got pulled over for speeding, if I drank alcohol, or if I had stolen anything. The priest asked if I'd stolen anything at work, if I was late to my employment, if I did anything to harm my employer, and if I had any bad intentions regarding my employment. The Labor Department also alleged that the employer sought to retaliate against workers and silence them, as well as obstruct an investigation and prevent the employees from receiving unpaid wages. So it's a crazy situation. The restaurant appears to be in a little bit of hot water over this, and it's bizarre. And the reason I say that is you don't hear about things like this that often, but I can tell you it immediately brought a story to my mind. There was an airplane crash in Detroit back in the 80s, Flight 255 out of Detroit Metro Airport, that crashed shortly after takeoff. In fact, it never really completed its takeoff because it clipped something as it was coming out of the airport at the end of the runway and then crashed forthwith into I-94 near Middle Belt. And it was Flight 255. And that airplane crash made headlines for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that everyone on board died except for one person. There was a young girl, a small child who survived which was just, and that's, I don't like to use the phrase miracle in the sense of news stories. Everything's a miracle. That actually is. To see that every single person on board this airplane died except for this young girl who appeared to be relatively unscathed considering what she went through. But a weirder part of that story was that it became a huge, huge event in the local media in Detroit. I mean, it made national news. A friend of mine was in England, and he saw a tabloid that had photographs on the front page of the airplane crash site. But in the stories that came out, there was a man dressed as a priest walking around, and he would walk up to people and he'd start talking to them. And many people got the impression that he was just there to comfort them because he's a priest and he apparently got called by a higher power to be there. And if he got to talking to you and you didn't seem too distraught, he'd say, well, here's the deal. I have a friend who's an attorney, and he specializes in airplane crashes. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but anytime a plane goes down in America, there's money there. And so here's his card. And he's handing out business cards of an attorney. And somebody thought that seemed a little strange and reported him to authorities, and he got chased out of there. And then apparently he skedaddled, and I believe he skedaddled back to, by the way, that's a legal term, he skedaddled back to Canada, where he'd come from. And they later determined that he was not a priest. And he was handing out business cards for an attorney who later said, I have no idea who that guy is or why he would do that. which makes you wonder. I've never had anybody go to an airplane crash site and hand out my business cards, dressed as a priest or otherwise. And so it's one of those really, really weird parts of that story. And this happened, like I said, back in the 1980s. And I remember the evening the plane crashed because I'd spent the day hanging out with my friends and then came home, turned the TV on, and they busted in with a story and said a flight out of Detroit Metro crashed on takeoff. And I remember reading about the story in the news as it unfolded over the next few days. And the story about the fake priest popped up. And so when I saw this headline, California restaurant used fake priest to get workers to confess sins, the feds say. The question, of course, is will the restaurant owner admit that? Or will he claim it was a mistake? I thought he was a real priest. And by the way, how normal is that to bring in a priest, real or otherwise, to have your workers confess on the premises? And worse, of course, is any priest, fake or otherwise, that then shares the results of his investigation, i.e. his confession hearing, with anybody else. I believe that is also a problem. So it's a very, very strange story, but it sounds like the Department of Labor is on top of this one and not exactly sure what all is going to happen. But he has been ordered to pay the back wages of $140,000 and damages to 35 employees. And the question then becomes what else will happen, if anything, regarding the fake priest. So it's a crazy story reported all over the place, including CBS Money Watch. Amy Peachy wrote this one. There's not much more to add to this. It's just strange. This is one of the stranger workplace environment stories I've ever heard. It's one of the strangest. And you really wonder what prompts people to do the things they do. I mean, I understand the motive behind the fake priest handing out the business cards was he was trying to drum up business for somebody, and presumably somebody had encouraged him by saying, if you do this, you will be rewarded. Not up there, but in your wallet. So, California restaurant used fake priests to get workers to confess their sins, according to the feds. Amy Peachy wrote that, and a lot of people sent it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Be present in all you do.